Hello, people. Finished a book, Shamrock and Sword. This is about the St. Patrick's Brigade that fought for the Mexicans in the Mexican-American War. This is probably my third or fourth book regarding the Mexican-American War, and it wasn't great. I mean, I read it without stopping. I didn't struggle through it or anything. It wasn't great. But the other books that I've read are maybe a little bit more detailed, and they probably give a better account of the the St. Patrick's Brigade. So I don't have a lot of notes. I'm going to go ahead and try and zip through this. The book was published in 1989. It's only 185 pages, so I've been done with this for a couple of days. There was a few first-hand accounts, and I really like that. You can never give me enough first-hand accounts. Fourth paragraph, page 35. And this is just... these guys were all deserters, you know. They deserted from the United States Army. Many of them were not born in the United States. They had come over. Some of them deserted from another army and joined the United States Army. And then they deserted and joined the Mexican Army. And there was many reasons for them deserting. Some of the other books that I've read makes it sound like the Irishmen among the St. Patrick's Brigade, they weren't all Irish, made it sound like they were really concerned about whether the war was moral or not, and that doesn't seem to be the case. More often, I think they were lured into deserting by promises of better pay, nicer uniforms, Mexican women, and being promoted once they got into the Mexican Army. And this little first-hand account here is what happens. One of the deserters writes about Mexican food. The hungry man squats down beside the cellar, makes a breakfast or dinner table of his knees, holds out his tortilla spread flat on his hand for a ladle of chili and a lump of meat, then doubles up the edges of the cake, sandwich fashion, and so on until his appetite is satisfied. He who is better off in the world, or indulges occasionally in a little extravagance, owns a clay platter. Into this he causes his frijoles, or chili and meat, to be thrown, and making a spoon of his tortilla, gradually gets possession of his food, and terminates his repast by eating the spoon itself. I'm always struck by how small the armies are in this war. You know, a large army for the Americans would have been 5,000 men. The Mexicans managed to muster, 20,000 men. On paper, they did. Their cavalry was probably their best unit. There was probably the wealthier Mexicans that were in the cavalry. They had all kinds of swords and lances and beautiful uniforms. Their fighting qualities, I don't know. They were kind of like the Italian Air Force in World War II. They're great flyers, but when it came to the dogfight, they would be running low on fuel and they would go home. And it was probably the same with the Mexican cavalry. But you know what? I think they fought as well as they could. I really do. They inflicted casualties on the Americans. The Americans lost a lot of men, and as usually true with that era, more more men died from sickness or from wounds that were not life-threatening. And my note here is Boer commandos had more men. And you know, uh, that that's just the way it was. DeWitt, Botha, they went around with 5,000-6,000 men, all on horseback. Bottom of 71, top of 72. It's just talking about the rifles that they used. The muskets used by the San Patricios, St. Patrick's, were muzzle-loading weapons with a flintlock mechanism to ignite the charge. Usually the gunpowder charge came pre-measured and wrapped in paper with the ball. This was called a cartridge. In action, an infantryman stood the gun on its stock, tore open the cartridge with his teeth, and a lot of people during the Napoleonic Wars, they would literally knock their front teeth out to avoid service. Poured the powder down the barrel, dropped in the ball, using the cartridge paper as a wad, and then seated the ball with a long ramrod. The musket at this point had to be primed by pouring a pinch of fine gunpowder into the pan. After the gun was cocked and the trigger pulled, the flint struck a steel plate, causing a spark that fired the priming powder, whereupon the flash passed through a tiny hole into the breech of the barrel, setting off the main charge. But sometimes only the primer would go off, producing a mere flash in the pan. So that's where that came from. Second paragraph, 107. Harney, whose obituary in the Journal of the United States Cavalry Associations noted that he was a right hard hater always, somewhat ferocious too, in the award of punishment, arranged a dramatic finale for the doomed St. Patrick's. He selected a high rise of ground near, there's some Mexican name there that I can't pronounce, but this is about some of these battles on the edge of Mexico City. They captured a whole shitload of these St. Patrick's guys, which were only maybe half Irish. The next largest ethnicity would be German, and then it was just small amounts from all kinds of countries. Harney, there was a guy named O'Connor that had his legs blown off in this battle. And when Harney found out that O'Connor was still in the hospital, he was enraged. He rode over and got him with a wagon, brought him over, and they hung him too. And then the other books that I've read say the same thing, that his fellow St. Patrick's teased him by saying, "Don't worry, O'Connor, you'll soon be dancing again," which I thought was very funny because apparently when they hang you, your legs are jumping around, and they call it dancing, dancing at the end of a rope. And since the guy had his legs blown off, he couldn't dance. I'm sure you get it. 148 and 149. My note there says, a deserter after the war. I soon left the capital, and now for more than 30 years I have been, more or less like Cain, a vagabond and a wanderer upon the earth. I am, in truth, a man who has no country, and I freely confess that I deserve to be in that condition. I was married many years ago, but my wife, a pretty Mexican woman to whom I was much attached, died long ago, leaving no children. I am now all alone in the cold world, without wife, child, or friend. My native country is closed against me forever. I'd be taken and executed if I dared to return there, because, even changed as I am, some old comrade would be sure to run across and recognize me. In spite of my long residence in Mexico, I never could warm up to it as a home. I banish care by drinking, when I have the money to pay for liquor, and by moving constantly from one place to another. Nobody knows my real name, and nobody shall. It will die with me. That's written much later, after the war is over. And here's my last one, bottom of 150. There were many possible reasons for desertion. Contemporary sources indicate that the following were principal ones: brutal military discipline, which seemed unjust to some soldiers; hatred of military life or unsuitability for it; sickness and disease, which may have disoriented some men; harassment or discrimination against foreign-born soldiers and by their native-born officers; religious sentiments and ideological beliefs; the lure of women; drunkenness, which sometimes led to their capture by the enemy; and enticements of cash prizes, rank promotions, and land bonuses offered by Mexican military officers. There's some graphs in here that shows desertion rates through the major wars. And the Mexican-American War has a very high desertion rate. It's like 12%. The only war that even came close was the Vietnam War. And that was, I believe, I'm not going to find it and look through here, but I believe that was 8%. And they probably deserted there for some of the same reasons. Thanks for watching.